What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Culture Binge number 7 for July 1st, 2019. This is the show where we feast on everything going on in the zeitgeist and digest it for all of you, our beautiful listeners. How's it going? My name is Jared. I'm joined here with the Culture Binge crew. We got Serby.
Hi, everyone.
And Alec.
Hey, how's it going?
All right. So today, as always, we're going to start with slaps and chaps. What's been good this week? What's been bad this week? Let's start with Alec.
So this is not a political podcast, as you know, and it's not a political segment, but what slaps are Marianne Williamson memes. For anyone who doesn't know, she was in the Democratic debates. I don't really know much about her policies, but I do know I was told she was Oprah's former spiritual advisor, and memes about her are just so good, and I just want to show everyone a few. Can we pull those up, Mitch?
I love this one.
Yeah. So, have you seen these, Serby? Do you know who Marianne Williamson is?
I mean, only from the debate. But
can you describe the wrestling one?
Essential oil. I mean, come on.
I wonder if she's friends with Gwyneth Paltrow.
Oh,
hopefully.
I'm sure.
I mean, not hopefully. I can't tell what's ironic anymore. There's like a Facebook page that one of our writers, Jeanette, sent me. It's called like Marianne Williamson orb posting, and I just highly recommend it. Facebook was kind of down, so I couldn't get too many of them, but that's what slaps. And as far as what chaps my ass, it was really nerdy. I was demoted to the lowest division of my online trivia league.
Oh, that means you're doing poorly?
Yeah. I mean, like, I was already second from the bottom, and I was fourth to last. So, not great.
Not great, man. You should be repping Wisecrack better than that, man. You need to know more useless trivia.
I feel like if people went to the pub trivias I went to, they would think less of Wisecrack.
Okay. Well, good to know. All right, Serby, what about you?
So, this week, nothing is jumping out at me in terms of slapping. Things
that's
are just
sad.
And what's been chapping, so I recently checked my rating on a ride sharing app. I will not say the name in case they're a sponsor. So I checked it. But... okay, good. So fuck Uber. So first of all, I don't want to get any hate mail about like why I'm using Uber. I went to Europe. Europe doesn't have Lyft. So I only have a 16 gigabyte phone. I have to like figure out what kind of app to use. Anyway, I used Uber. I had a 5-star rating. And then I checked it again like the other day, and I have 4.87. And I'm baffled. I'm such a good passenger. I'm kind. I'm polite. I'm clean. I tell funny stories. I keep people entertained. And if it seems like my driver doesn't want to chat with me, I'm cool. I'll look out the window and daydream. And I'm absolutely confused why I have 4.87. That's like a bad review. So
that's not that bad. That's almost perfect.
I think that could just be one time you piss somebody off.
Well, there was one time a driver put his hand on my leg, and we exchanged words, and he probably gave me a 1 star.
What did you give him?
I gave him 1 star, and I wrote into Uber.
Okay.
So hopefully some words were exchanged.
Are you generally that concerned about your Uber rating or Uber rate?
No, I'm not. Well, that's the thing. I don't really care about my rating or like really anything like that. Like I don't mind about those things. I only looked because I felt like in the past couple of weeks I had been matched with a lot of drivers who had really, really low ratings, like 4.8 whatever. And so I thought that was really strange. Normally I had always gotten like either 5-star or 4.9. So I didn't know why that was happening. And then I looked. And so I feel like if you're a bad passenger, they rate you, they match you with other bad drivers. So I felt like the quality of my drivers was decreasing. And apparently it's because I'm an awful passenger.
God, this must just be something that dudes don't have to think about, but I never look at the rating. I mean, as long as it's not 1 star, I'm like, all right, I'll make it there alive.
You know, I have a pretty high rating, and my girlfriend inexplicably has a lower rating, even though we all take the same Ubers together. So, yeah, it's weird. And it's also, I feel like there's a pressure. I always leave my Uber drivers 5 stars because I know their livelihood depends on it. So I've been in situations where the driver was literally falling asleep at the wheel, and I was like, I mean, maybe they're just having an off day, like 5 stars, or I'll just like be paralyzed by like the ethical dilemma and then just not leave a review at all. And I wish they would have the same courtesy.
Wow.
Well, it's really chapping me, and that's why nothing slaps this week, because I'm so angry about this.
Oh, well, I'm sorry to hear that, Serby. So for me, what slaps this week? So One Punch Man Season 2 is over now. Overall, the season wasn't quite as good as Season 1, but I thought the finale was pretty good, and it made me excited for Season 3. So I'm going to say that it's a soft slaps. And in terms of what chaps, I read in the Hollywood Reporter the other day that for this year, 2019, Disney accounts for 40% of the total box office revenue. That 40% of every dollar made in the box office this year. And it's probably only going to go up because everyone except them is having failing movies this summer. And soon it's going to not be going to the movies. It's going to be going to see a Disney.
I'm not thrilled about the fact that Disney has taken over so much. I'm also not pleased with all of my favorite parts about Disneyland turning into like Disney films. Like instead of going to the submarine ride, you're now going on like the Nemo ride.
Oh, right.
So I feel like Disney's just slowly taking over our lives, and this news it displeases me.
Yeah, it's a weird time for the movie industry. But anyway, let's go into the topics today. So up top, we're going to be talking about deep fakes. We're going to be talking about gene-edited babies. We're going to be talking about a bizarre story about in Toy Story 2, they have taken out a scene for the digital release. We're going to be talking about a secret for happiness coming from Japan. We're going to be talking about an awesome Uve Boll documentary that I saw last night. And if we have time, we're going to be talking about if video games can change lives. Let's go to the very first one with deep fakes that Alec has brought in. So go for it, Alec.
I'm going to talk about deepfakes, but this is just an impromptu slaps. Someone named Alex O, weird name by the way, said that my beard game is strong and you need to step it up, Jared. So thank you.
Oh, I'll work on it. Well, see, I got the gray going. Got the gray.
Oh,
You know, it's.
I got a couple of those popping up.
I'm not at the stage yet where I'm going to start coloring my beard. I can't. That's too early.
I feel
I
like
don't even know if I
should.
could ever
It's
really
very
do that.
distinguished.
Yeah, I'm gonna look distinguished as fuck when I get that salt and pepper going.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think
I'm
to
into
me,
it.
it's what like I don't know what it's not salt and pepper. It's salt and something else. Salt and ginger, I guess.
Cayenne pepper.
Cayenne, yeah, salt and cayenne. Let's go with that.
All right, so it seems like my microphone is possibly fixed for everyone. All right, so deepfakes. The piece of news that I want to talk about first is that Virginia seems to have amended an existing law about revenge porn. So they are, I think, the first state to ban deepfakes, and that is, I guess, deepfakes as porn, not deepfakes as in putting Nicolas Cage in everything, which I would say is a worthwhile task, the Nick Cage thing.
Can you describe what is a deep fake? Give me an example of something that they would have banned under this law.
Yeah, so like taking an existing porn and putting a actor or actress's face in it. So essentially making it look like Jennifer Lawrence or somebody is having sex when it is in fact like two completely different actors. So it's like transposing their face. I mean, similarly, it's like the non-porn version of this is taking scenes from Superman and putting Nick Cage's face in instead of Henry Cavill's. And again, totally worthwhile. So the porn is there. The porn is banned in Virginia, first state. And yeah, I mean, Serby, what is your exposure? Maybe not exposure is the wrong word, but what do you know about deepfakes so far?
Not a ton. I did hear that people were putting like celebrity pictures on like porn actresses, but I didn't realize that they could do it on video. I think it's hilarious that people do like the Nick Cage thing, and I would love it if somebody did that to me. Not the porn stuff, but the other stuff. Even the porn stuff if you want, but
Oh, no.
I guess I don't see the problem so much. Like why is that bad? I mean, this is going to sound really bad, but like if somebody did that to me, I would just be like, oh, that's not real. Like it wouldn't faze me.
Yeah, this is kind of what I wanted to talk about. So the whole conversation about deepfakes entirely, we're talking about how, all right, now we'll never know if anything is real because we can just create a video of Obama or Trump or anybody saying whatever, and we'll never trust each other into what is real and what is fabricated. But how is that any different than, I mean, we've been saying that people have been saying that Stanley Kubrick faked the moon landing for 50 years. We've been saying that Hollywood has the technology to essentially do anything. And I guess what's the difference of when the printing press was invented or something? I could write an article that's horribly racist or something and then just append Serby's name on it. And how would people know that that isn't real?
So, I think it's just a matter of scale.
And that's the other thing. How convincing are these deep fakes? Because all the ones that I've seen, the Nicolas Cage ones, maybe they're just rough around the edges because it's a fan doing it just to have a funny Nick Cage moment. But yeah, I mean, how good is it? I'm a little skeptical that it's as if you're really watching Jennifer Lawrence have sex.
I mean, I'm sure you can tell, and even like the Nick Cage ones you can, but as the technology gets better and better, like I think we should assume that the technology in a year or 2 years, maybe even 3 years, will be to the untrained human eye probably indistinguishable. But I think like to the thing about writing your letter on something, first I think there were kind of ways around that, right? Like you have like how do you know a king sent this decree? And the answer was there was like the official seal and stamp, or a representative, or even like if someone says they're a cop, how do you know? And we have these badges, and we put special technology on dollar bills to say that we just haven't photocopied them. So yeah, like we're always making technology or systems to balance that. But I think the thing with video is that there's a pretty good article, and let me try to pull it up unless I X'd out of it. But it is it's on The Atlantic. The Era of Fake Video Begins by Frank Foer. And he kind of points out, quoting somebody else, that up until this point, video has been the one thing that we're like, no, you can't really fake video. I mean, like with Bigfoot, you could get some blurry footage, or yeah, maybe the government could have done some shit with the moon and its soundstage. But like when there is candid footage of, there was that candid footage of Mitt Romney during the election that like really swayed public opinion about him, taken by like a bartender. When you see that kind of stuff, people's immediate reactions are, oh yeah, this is real. Like it's very hard to fake a video. And I think what Frank Foer's argument is that video is like the last bastion of shared reality that we have, more or less, in that when we see videos, we assume they're real. Like we can't contest that. Unlike, say, a news article, which could be, manufactured or, fake or something like that. You can't sort of fake the footage. And he points out very alarmingly that once that bridge is crossed, then like, what does even reality mean when we can just argue like any video proof or any proof of any kind is all fake?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a pickle. I guess many times in my life, we've had technology come up that says, oh, in a couple of years, it's going to be indistinguishable from reality. And it just never really happened. And even those deepfakes that you brought up a couple weeks ago, there was the Zuckerberg one, and then there was the Kim Kardashian one. It looked convincing, but I bet you an expert or even someone who just downloads the video and can look at it frame by frame can probably tell that it's not real. Yeah. And go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, there's lots of cases where that are true, but like there's that Nancy Pelosi video where it looks like she's drunk, and that's not a deep fake. That's just the footage of her.
That's just down. Editing.
Yeah, it's editing, which I guess, yeah, you could say this problem has existed, but lots of people share that like as if it were real. And I think the idea that like some IT guy can like download it and go frame by frame and prove it's fake, I mean, that helps, but a lie can spread so much faster than the truth.
So I think that is like the biggest danger, and something that does terrify me is using deep fakes to sway public opinion, because I think there is real damage that can be done from something like that. But if it's just like a random celebrity like showing up in a porno like that, I don't really see the problem unless it affects their like earning potential or their ability to like sign in for movies or something like that. But that is terrifying, the idea that it can sway opinions.
And it's so even, let's say, 20 years ago when internet porn was mostly just images, like you could, for the first time, it's like, oh, I don't need to see the still images in a Playboy magazine. I can now see it on the internet. I mean, there weren't any laws that were keeping people from photoshopping images of celebrities into nudes, were there?
I don't, not that I know of. But it is kind of interesting because, you know, to Serby's point about like it possibly hurting their career, I think one of the things, so there's essentially an app called Deep Nude, I think, where it's similar technology, but you take like a photo of anyone on social media, and it essentially undresses them via computer generated images. And
well, that's just auto Photoshop, right? It's just an automatic Photoshop.
Well, it's not like putting their face on another image. It is like the image, right? Like if we uploaded a photo of you, I don't know if it works on men, but like if we uploaded a photo of you in the studio, it would be like the same posture you're sitting in, you know, that same background, the same but it's just like sort of drawing in what is under your shirt, right? And the thing, the sort of concern raised with that in this article on The Verge, which I don't think has happened yet, is like blackmailing people, right? Being like, I have these fake photos. Yeah, you could say they're not real, but like who will really be able to tell? And I don't know if those photos are specifically that convincing, but I don't know, like machine learning is really good. It's very powerful. It's only getting better. And yeah, it's scary. And I will even say to like Serby kind of like not caring, I don't know, like I think it's weird. So I mentioned to Jared earlier that like the original Star Trek, people used to draw like fan erotica of Captain Kirk and Spock screwing each other. And first of all, that's like a character, but again, it's like imagining William Shatner naked. And if something like that happened to me, I would be super weirded out by it.
Yeah, like, you know, that's true. I agree with that. If somebody sent me a picture, like a fake nude of myself, I would not like that. It would weird me out. And then I would worry, like, would my coworkers see that? Would my manager see that? What about my organization? Like, I would worry about those sorts of things. Or like my family, I'm not going to go around like into my family's group chat and say, hey, you might see some nudes of me. They're not real.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think that would be weird.
But just to play devil's advocate here, do you not think that this is an opportunity for utopia where, yeah, maybe at the beginning we start blackmailing each other, but eventually people just start realizing that I can't blackmail someone because they can just as easily create a deep fake of me as a nude, and to the point where we just stop caring. We stop caring whose dick is where on the internet because everybody's dick is everywhere, or maybe it's the fake dick, maybe it's so close to their real dick that you can't even tell the difference. We probably just got demonetized, but you see what I'm saying? It becomes to the point where
I think there's an asymmetry in that, like, if you're a celebrity and some like shitlord on the internet is like, I made a deep fake of you, and let's just say Jennifer Lawrence is like, fine, I made a deep fake of you. That guy's just gonna be like, I don't give a shit. Like nobody knows or cares about who I am.
No, but the point is he's not going to be able to blackmail Jennifer Lawrence because there will be a million deep fakes of Jennifer Lawrence nude on the internet to the point where she's just like, I don't give a shit.
That is interesting in that, like, because all sense of reality will be eroded, that whether it's real or not, like it would almost be liberating from sex tapes, because at any point someone could just be like, whatever, it was a deep fake, even if it was real. In that, like, we'll all become nihilist and not have any opinion on what's real or fake and just stop caring about literally everything. That could be like a weird quasi-utopia.
That's what they say about
dilutes the fear.
Yeah, I mean, that's what they say about drinking. People don't binge drink in college in countries where the drinking age is low because it's not this forbidden fruit. And if we make deepfakes or nude pictures or nude videos this forbidden fruit, then yeah, it's going to be more scandalous when these things do happen. But if we just kind of say fuck it, then I don't think people are really going to care. I think that's really the key here, is to get people to care less.
All right.
Now, having said that, when it comes to public opinion and politics and stuff like that, when apathy on that level happens, then I agree that it's kind of dystopian. Like, if you can't even turn on the news or turn on the internet and find out what your local representative really said and didn't, that's obviously a problem. But I think it can be fixed. Like you said, there's going to be some sort of like watermark equivalent that is done.
Yeah, I mean, it's like we're going to release the technology, or I mean, the technology's already out, but we release it before we figure out like how we can even deal with it, which I think is that our next topic?
That is our next topic. Great segue.
Yeah.
Sir, we talk about gene-edited babies.
Interesting news coming out of Russia. A scientist says he wants to create more genetically modified babies. He claims that he has created a safe way to do so and says, how can it be unethical if we will make a healthy baby instead of a diseased one? Why is it unethical? So the idea is that he would edit a gene called CCR5 to replicate a naturally occurring variation that protects people from HIV and essentially guarantees that babies will be HIV negative. So some HIV positive parents are thrilled about this news, but scientists are deeply skeptical. Their main concern is that this method could cause mutations that could lead to cancer or other diseases, or that could create changes that could be passed down through future generations. So the Russian scientist behind this effort is also interested in the possibility of creating designer babies. He said, in the future, people would like to make those babies more smart, for example. For my child, I'd like smarter, maybe stronger and faster. Now, I know this topic, the scientist, the Russian scientist who's behind this. So I know that this topic can spark a religious debate, but I'd like to focus solely on the medical and technological aspect of editing genes. At what point are we going too far with technology, and is it unethical to edit genes to prevent lifelong illnesses?
So I don't think the ethical thing, like the scientists aren't saying it's unethical because they're editing the genome. I think they're saying it's unethical because it's wildly untested. And like the example of this is the guy in China who did it without telling anyone, and it was like, surprise. And I think it was the same HIV gene. So the way genes...
Well, what happened to him? Is he okay?
God, I actually don't know what happened to him, but I mean, he's like disgraced. I don't know if he's like on the lam, or maybe he's fine. I don't know, but I know. So I think he was trying to you edit this gene and it essentially makes you resilient or unable to get HIV, some level of that. But what they discovered is, so the way genes work is many of them code proteins, and your body uses like all these thousands of different kinds of proteins to do all kinds of crazy shit. Sometimes proteins do multiple things. So what they found in the China thing is that the way he mutated the gene essentially looked a lot like a mutation that is not sort of created by a scientist, that makes people live significantly shorter lives for a variety of reasons. Also, there was some like the protein that protects from HIV could make you more susceptible to other diseases like malaria. And I think the reason it's unethical is because right now we have a rapidly expanding understanding of how like genes work and how the proteins that they code work. And he's just framing it as like, what's wrong? Like they're susceptible for HIV and then they're not. It's like, no. Like the protein involved in that is probably involved in dozens, if not hundreds of other things. In fact, certain genes scientists are discovering can code multiple genes, right? So it's like, oh, I made you immune from HIV, but also, gave you these debilitating things. And also we don't understand how those genes can work in conjunction with other genes and how, like, as you noted, they'll be passed down. So I think that's why it's unethical. And I think the other sort of ethical quandary is that in medicine, there's like the idea of informed consent, right? You do a pharmaceutical trial and you're saying like, listen, we're trying this drug that will cure cancer, or at least alleviating the symptoms. Here are the risks that we know about, et cetera, et cetera. And like a baby can't consent to that. Obviously the parents can, but can you imagine like being born and then you're 15 and all of a sudden like your arm falls off and it's like, why'd that happen? It's like, oh yeah, we did this experiment on you that we really didn't understand 15 years ago. Surprise.
So that is exactly what I was feeling, is that there's no informed consent from the subject of the gene editing. Also, I think it's, I totally lost my train of thought. I think it feels like human experimentation. Like there's a line in this this write-up that says something like he just wants to play around. And that sort of feels like what this is that he has this idea and he's like, I'm going to create, like, first of all, an HIV positive baby, but then his next step is to create like a super baby where it's smart and fast and strong. And I think that's something about technology that like frightens me, that we can do that. We'll potentially do that. We're not there yet, but it's strange to me that people are willing to take risks like that and not get consent from people in order to do such wild medical things.
Yeah, and I think the whole idea of playing around is also scary because, and this comes up like the same issue kind of in genetic testing of, well, not only like of parents, right? Like if you want to conceive a child, you might do like genetic counseling where you say like, hey, your kid's at risk for X, Y, and Z. And people have even been kind of critical of that because it's very like eugenic-y, but like at the same time, it's like, oh, does my kid have a 50% chance of having like this crippling genetic condition that will make them live for 5 years a terrible and painful life? So that's like super tricky. But in this case, I feel like it's even worse because, I mean, yeah, like we could all get behind if it were safe and tested and all these things. Oh, we're going to make a gene that makes people immune from HIV and we know there's no ill side effects if we know that. But then immediately goes to like, well, now we can make your kid taller. We can make your kid smarter. And there's two levels. There's societal implication of the fact that this will probably be very expensive. And all of a sudden rich people can make their kids smarter and like maintain essentially an aristocracy of like the smartest and strongest people. And the other part of that is just like, I don't mean like allowing people to play God in that sort of like scaremongering kind of way, but I just mean like there's so many terrible narcissistic parents out there who'd be like, oh, my baby's going to be short. Like I want them to be taller and I want them to be more attractive and they need like this kind of smile, like designer babies. And that seems horrifying. I'm terrified of what parents would do with this technology given the opportunity.
I agree. And I think knowing what wealthy parents or just parents in general will do in order to get their kids ahead, it's frightening to think what they would be able to do if they can like mess with genes, like you said. And also people who don't have their children's best interests at heart or like humanity's best interests at heart. Like what would, you know, some of the dictators around the world do if they could create a new population of like strong, fast, intelligent people?
And that's why, I think, the eugenics wars of the 1990s, according to Star Trek.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that's what I was going to say, is that the thing that scares me the most about this is that it's just going to create basically a new arms race, but about, you know, our biology rather than the weapons that we can create. But the one thing I'll say about this is that I imagine, Serby, you've ever seen the movie Gattaca?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a really awesome part in that movie. It's kind of a small detail, but Gattaca, for those of you who haven't seen it, is essentially about this. There's one character who is a genetically modified baby, and he's smarter and more handsome and more able-bodied than the guy who's our other main character, who has I think he has a physical disadvantage, but basically he was just a normie baby. But there's a part in the movie where people go to a concert, and the concert is for a pianist who has 11 fingers, and only he can play this very, very complex piece of music. And because he has this genetic defect that no one would ever ask for, he's able to create something beautiful that no normal person could do, or that anyone would actually seek out if they were able to determine what their baby would become. So that's something kind of a little bit on the side of like the mystical of why we should perhaps, you know, that there may be something we lose by choosing how babies come into this world.
Yeah. And I think another part is that whatever we choose, even as individuals, will have like a societal spillover, in that, like, what is it like? Let's just say people have the opportunity to make like super incredibly strong babies. What's a spillover? Is there now essentially like possibly criminals out there who have, you know, it's like a superhero fighting a regular person? Do we like, then we have to create this, like, how do the police deal with that? And that's kind of like a dumb example, but even like making babies, our limited understanding of how these things work. So for instance, if you want to make your child smarter, I mean, there's lots of different kinds of intelligence, and we probably have a limited understanding of how intelligence truly works. So we could say, up one kind of intelligence at the expense of another. And then let's say you have a whole society of people who are dumb in a very specific way, say like emotional intelligence or something like that. That could have lots of spillover in like how politics happens or, wars being created. And of course, we won't even ask those questions until it's too late, much like all technology works, like Facebook. But instead it'll just be like, well, if my kid's taller, they'll get more money, they'll be more liked, and they'll be more successful romantically, which, is all kind of studies show this. So why not?
Yeah, can't say I'm excited for the future. Anyway, do you guys want to move on?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right. So apparently, if you download Toy Story 2 on Disney's streaming service, or I guess maybe off Amazon or something like that, whatever file that Disney has uploaded to be, quote, Toy Story 2, they edited out a scene that happens at the end. So at the end of all the Toy Story movies, they usually have this gag of outtakes. They're fake outtakes. So to be fair, this scene is not actually in the movie proper, but depending on what your definition is of the movie proper, you could say it is. But Mitch, why don't you go ahead and play? This is the scene that was taken out of the movie.
Bullseye, are you with me? Okay, good boy. Prospector, how about you?
And so you two are absolutely identical? I'm sure I could get you a part in Toy Story 3. I'm sorry, are we back? Oh, all right, girls. Lovely talking with you. Yes, anytime you'd like some tips on acting, I'd be glad to chat with you. All right, off you go then.
Okay, so it's a casting couch joke, which obviously everybody knows is a sensitive subject these days. But I mean, I contend that no matter what your stance on the Me Too movement is, that this should anger you for a number of reasons. One, it's not okay for us to pretend that we're just as noble now as we were in the past. It's not okay, nor is it necessary for us to take our contemporary moral codes, project them into the past, and rewrite history to make it less offensive. And it's not okay for these brands to feign that they weren't complicit in these ideas, because we all were. And this also just sets a really bad precedent. There are hundreds, thousands of problematic films. I mean, every film made before 2010 is basically problematic. So, although I don't think that Disney is doing this, I think they're just trying to avoid bad PR. And that's kind of the sad thing, is that everything these days in entertainment is motivated by, we want to avoid horrible PR. But what do you guys think about this?
I think it's important to frame that. So like, I think I half agree with you. But I'll say, like, it's important to note that this isn't a new thing. I was even like just looking at Disney specifically, and there's lots of other examples of this. So for instance, Melody Time is not a thing I've seen. There's a character, Pecos Bill. Anyway, he's smoking. And then when it was released in, I think it was the 90s. I'm not quite sure about that. They digitally or they altered out the cigarette, right? Because you don't want to teach kids to smoke. Other examples of this are like during World War II, Disney, or just in general, there's lots of like cartoons that were incredibly racist, usually about like, Japanese people, or, early on with blackface and things like that. And so like movies were often re-released, in the 80s, 90s, whatever, without those characters or edited or altered or whatever. So I think that's important. And I think as far as like the way I agree and I don't agree with you is on one hand, like, let's not pretend that Disney is not anything but, it's Pixar?
They're owned by Disney. Same thing.
Yeah. Let's not pretend they're anything other than a company that wants to make money. So like as a business decision, it's like, oh, should we put this thing in there that will possibly make people not buy it? Like, no, it's a business decision. But like to the point that I do sort of agree with is that like, it's just like the erasure of history. And I think like historically speaking, if we were shitty in the past, we should remember that. Like, I'm not saying like I want to have my future kids sit down and watch like the old like Looney Tunes animations with like jokes about like zeros and like, Asian stereotypes and stuff like that. But I still think it's like important as a society that we like have access to that and be like, oh yeah, like here's how we were historically. Similarly, like the fact that this was an appropriate joke in whatever year Toy Story came out, I think is like historically relevant, right? Whether you agree or disagree with it. So I think that's important. But then again, like I can't really imagine as a business that cares about making money that they care about any of our arguments about like historical preservation.
I agree with Alec. I also think that, so I haven't seen any of the Toy Stories other than the first one. So my understanding is that Toy Story is like more of a children's movie. And I think this joke doesn't have a role in that type of film. Maybe if
But it did before this year.
But it was a joke for the like adults watching it that the kids would probably not get.
Well, that's a great point. I mean, I watched a lot of adult movies when I was a kid, and so much of those things flew over my head. I'll rewatch movies these days that I haven't seen for a decade or longer ago, and I'll be like, oh, wow, yeah, I really didn't get that. And I'm not look, I'm not a child psychologist. I can't really speak to whether or not those jokes that I didn't get had an effect on me, but I think you're right that that joke is there for adults, and I think adults should have the critical capacity to say that, okay, well, this was released in a time during a different cultural context, and it was frowned upon more than it is now, or at least there was a different element of open secret that has now been blown wide open. It's a weird thing.
Yeah, like to be honest, I don't follow Hollywood that much. I barely know anything, which is surprising for someone who works at Wisecrack. But so like some people's reaction to a lot of this like kind of Harvey Weinstein stuff is like, oh, of course this is happening. I literally had no idea because I just don't pay attention to, rumors, gossip, etc. That's going on with Hollywood. So like if I saw this joke when it came out, I would have been like, oh, this is a joke about like a thing that happens in porn that isn't real. But I guess it is real, so it's like, well, that makes it a little less funny.
Yeah, that's the other element that I haven't brought in yet. I think another thing in which why they took it out is because they're trying to distance themselves from the guy who used to run Pixar, John Lasseter, who this might even be a John Lasseter joke because he was expelled from the company for inappropriate advances towards women that he worked with. So I actually don't, it would be weird if they put that in as a joke, is like, hey, this is a wink on how our boss is such a creep. But, I mean, that might be what it is, and it might just be some uncomfortable thing that Disney is trying to bury, which I don't really know if that changes it for me, but I don't know. I just think that and I think you and I agree on this, Alec, that we need to confront ugly things about our past and not sweep it under the rug and not pretend like we weren't complicit in these things.
Yeah, I agree, but it's like, hey, company that's beholden to their shareholders, would you like to help us confront history? And they're like, fuck no, like why would I ever do that? And I'm not
I mean, obviously
that.
Shitty things happen in business all the time,
right? I just think like we're saying like we as a society need to do X, Y, and Z, but we forget the fact that we're talking about people who are motivated by profit, and like of course profit wise it doesn't make sense. So like yeah, I agree I think we're agreeing here.
Cool. That's all I really have to say. Not a big fan of things being edited, although I recognize that there are some things that, are now looked at differently. But anyway, let's go with the next one. So Serbi's got something about Japan's secret for happiness.
Yes. The Japanese have a secret to living a longer, happier, and more fulfilled life. And it can be summed up in one word, ikigai. So the following quote is from a 2009 TED Talk called How to Live to Be 100 Plus. In America, we divide our adult life into two categories, our work life and our retirement life. In Okinawa, there isn't even a word for retirement. Instead, there's simply ikigai, which essentially means the reason for which you wake up in the morning. So Okinawa is a place that has been nicknamed the Land of Immortals because it has the longest lifespans and highest rates of centenarians in the world. The idea with ikigai is that you have a sense of purpose, meaning, and motivation in life. One Okinawan catches fish for his family 3 times a week. He's 101. Another holds her great-great-great-granddaughter, which she says was like leaping into heaven. She's 102. And another says it's teaching martial arts. He's also 102. So there is some evidence that ikigai does work. In a 2008 study, researchers found that those who reported having ikigai in their lives had reduced risks of cardiovascular diseases and lower mortality rates. And this article provides 5 steps to discovering your ikigai. Start small, release yourself, create harmony and sustainability, the joy of small things, and being in the here and now. And it offers some abstract questions to help you identify your ikigai. What makes you happy? What are you good at? What and who do you value? So I love this idea of ikigai, and I've practiced several of these steps, but haven't done so with the purpose of discovering my ikigai. I don't know what my ikigai is, and I look forward to discovering it. And I have 2 questions for you too. 1, do you believe that this is the secret to a longer, healthier, and happier life, in addition to having good health, reducing stress, not taking drugs, etc., etc.? And 2, what is your ikigai?
Well, I definitely think that, as far as is it the secret, the thing that will give you a longer life or longevity, I don't know, but I definitely believe that. And by the way, we did a video about this. I think Helen wrote it like a year ago. I don't remember what the subject was. Maybe it was something about One Punch Man. But yeah, I mean, for most of my life, my ikigai was cinema. I was a hardcore cinephile. At one point, it was specifically The Matrix. But yeah, I mean, I'll be perfectly honest. There was like a good 6 months of my life where every day I would think about the final shot of the John Ford movie, The Searchers. And it just really gave me this sense of comfort just to think that something so beautiful and so brilliant was out there.
What's the
and I know that's a little bit weird.
Searchers?
It's just a shot of John Wayne walking off into the distance while the camera goes backwards through a door frame. And you kind of have to watch the whole movie, but basically the idea is just that John Wayne is the lone wolf who will never find any kind of happy equilibrium. He's just doomed to walk the earth alone and to right what wrongs he can, but there will never be a happy ending for him. And it was just communicated in a visual way that was like so profound to me that it was almost religious. And so, I mean, I still love cinema today. Moving to Hollywood and seeing how the industry has definitely changed my relationship with cinema. But I mean, it really did get me through most of my life. And I think it's extremely important to love what you do and to find meaning in what you do and to engage with things that you find meaningful in a kind of spiritual, mystical sense. So that's my answer. Alec, what about you?
Sorry, rephrase it. So what's my ikigai, which is like my purpose? And then what was the second part of that question?
Do you believe that this is the secret to a longer, healthier, and happier life?
Well, all right, let me start with that, which is I am super, super suspicious of all health journalism, especially that sounds like this. However, last week we were talking about bullshit jobs, talking about how people with no purpose in their jobs are like depressed and miserable. What's like a big thing about it. And when you talk about, depression, anxiety, those all kind of correlate to all the different ways we can die, also stress. So, I mean, there's probably something to it. I don't know if it necessarily needs to be like in this Japanese context. However, I think, yes, it is good to have a purpose in life and figure out what it is. It's also like thesis, Viktor Frankl, Man's Quest for Meaning. It kind of tackles with this. It's pretty good. I think mine is
Star Trek.
No. I just discovered really I took me a while to figure out what I like. Like I like reading, I like all the shit. I like writing, but I realized it was really all about like when I read things that I find interesting, I just get really, really excited about them and want to share them with people, which is the way I frame my job at Wisecrack. Like, yeah, I make these videos about like the philosophy of Rick and Morty and whatever, but really the core of it's like, oh, I read some books like 5 years ago and I love to tell you about them.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. Like when I think about Okinawans, they really seem to have figured it out. Like a lot of it comes down to having this purpose and developing a sense of community. And I wonder, like, is it that simple? Like, if this is true, is it that simple? Like, have a purpose in life, have a community, and that can help you feel more fulfilled and have you live a more meaningful life, which maybe means you keep living longer because you want to keep doing the thing you love more often.
Yeah, and I think like it ties into a lot of kind of studies or things that like public health people do know, which is why, again, like I'm skeptical, but I think there might be something to this. Like the idea of community, for instance, like when people are studying like opioid addiction or like what makes you at risk for that, oftentimes like social isolation is a big part of that, like not having a community. I imagine, I imagine like sort of purpose, or at least like not having something to look forward to. Like if you hate your job, you're probably going to be drawn to these unhealthy behaviors. So, yeah.
I took this class in college that I just now remembered, and it was called Gods and the Good Life. And the whole class was about how much does religion or thing. I believe we might have talked about Ikigai. Our professor had lived in Japan for a while, so I know we definitely talked about Shinto, but I think this is different, I think.
Yes.
And I remember one takeaway is that generally the more religious you are, and I know I'm equating religion to Ikigai, and I know they're not the same, but for many people, religion is their Ikigai or their sense of purpose and meaning in life. And the general trend was that your mental well-being is a lot better when you're religious, but your physical well-being is worse. Like apparently religious people are much more likely to be morbidly obese, which I found odd.
Well, because, you're just looking forward to the afterlife. What do you care about your disposable mortal body?
True. Yeah. Or, like Jesus or whoever will judge my soul, not my body or something. I don't know.
Serby.
Well, throw out a deep fake. Maybe you can get both in.
Serby, you said you don't know what your Ikigai is?
No, I have some ideas. I love that is definitely at the top of my list. I think I love stories. I love hearing stories and telling stories, but I don't know that I could say every morning this is why I wake up in the morning. This is what fills my life with joy. I know that I like spending time with my family. I like reading, but I don't know if that's the thing where I can point to when I'm 120 years old and say, this is the secret to my life.
What about Pride and Prejudice? I know you've read that how many times? 50?
So often. I read it every couple of months.
Wow.
That is something I enjoy. So I wonder if it is reading. I do like reading quite a bit.
Cool. All right. Shall we go on?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, so I was asking people around the office if they know who Uve Boll was, and for some of you listening, you're probably like, who doesn't know who Uve Boll is? But not a lot of people knew who he was, and I was like, wow. Then I have to talk about this because there's a new documentary out that just came out the end of June called, it's something like Go Fuck Yourself, the Uve Boll story, but because that's censored on every streaming platform that it's on, the only way you can find it is just the Uve Boll story. But real quick, Alec, I know we've briefly talked about him before, but Serby, do you know who Uve Boll is?
No.
So Uve Boll is a German filmmaker who's considered by some to be the worst filmmaker to ever live. He's made 33 films, many of which are based on video games, and he draws all the more ire because people's beloved IP are shit on by Boll's less than stellar filmmaking skills. So some of the video game movies he's made: Blood Rain, Postal, In the Name of the King, A Dungeon Siege Tale, House of the Dead, Alone in the Dark, Far Cry, Rampage. Anyway, so his movies are not very good. I've seen Postal, I've seen Blood Rain, I've seen either House of the Dead or Alone in the Dark. I don't remember which one it was. Whichever one had Tara Reid in it. I think it's Alone in the Dark. Anyway, new documentary came out, and I really think that he is going to, 10 years ago when he was big on the internet, people just loved to shit on him, mostly because they were like, hey, stop making video game movies. These video games are actually really awesome pieces of art, and you're turning them into absolute garbage, which I get. But the actual person, Uve Boll, I think is going to become a cult figure because there's some elements of him that are pretty awesome. So... And one of the things about him is he's just this wonderful rebel character who tears down the airs of pretension and self-importance that permeates Hollywood. So just to give you guys a little bit of a taste of what kind of a character this guy is. So first of all, he raises all of his own money, meaning that he is the producer, he's the director. Nobody gets to tell him what to do. He does whatever he wants. That means if he has a really offensive joke, and by the way, the movies are extremely offensive, extremely off-color humor. He made the opening scene of Postal is like a guy squeegeeing a window, and then like the camera widens out and you realize he's squeegeeing the Twin Towers, and then a plane comes and like knocks down the building, and then it's just like cut to title screen. Yeah, exactly. I mean, sometimes it's actually kind of funny, but go ahead.
Well, one thing I find very interesting is I only know about who he is from actually you and Austin talking about him. But I guess he, off these terrible movies, makes a ton of money through like German tax loopholes.
Yeah, go ahead. So that's a little bit untrue. He does get most of his funding from some sort of German film fund, and he does take advantage of Canadian tax laws. And that one of the reasons in order for him to get these tax write-offs is that he has to have the movie written, shot, and finished in the same year, which is one of the reasons why these things happen so quickly. But I want to play a clip for you guys. So one of the things is, since he is a businessman first and foremost, he was denied the ability to make a new movie when he wanted to make Blood Rain 3. So what did he do to convince investors? He said, you know what? Give me the money and I'll make 3 movies for the price of 1. So he had this World War II set built, and then for this movie Blood Rain, which is basically just like a sexy female Nazi vampire or vampire Nazi hunter. And he said, you know what, in order to make sure that the investors get their money back, for every shot, I'm going to take my sexy vampire chick, I'm going to put her to the side, and I'm going to call in a obese woman and basically improv stuff, and then create a fake World War II comedy film called Blubberella. So let's roll the trailer for Blubberella.
So excited.
So if you're seeing here, all of these are shots from Blood Rain 3. So he's literally, if you watch the movies back to back, about 30 to 40% of the movie is this exact same.
I didn't see her, but from all accounts, it moved like a slow tornado.
I've never seen anybody move like you do.
That hurt me more than it did you. I'm the damn fear, half human, half vampire.
Large. Very, very large girl.
Wow.
Very large?
Very large.
Like a caged rhino who hasn't been fed in weeks.
Pilates.
All of this is just being improv'd on the spot, just in order to make another movie for him to sell.
Of her eating.
Okay, give me the sandwich.
An even weirder thing about this is this woman, like 6 years prior, was the quote-unquote sex symbol in one of his movies. There's like a shot. He was very shameless about optimizing his movies for sex and violence. And so in one of the earlier movies, she was very thin, and there was just this gratuitous shot of her with her top off. And then fast forward all these years, and she's gained a lot of weight, but she still loves working with him.
Is that Clint Howard?
I don't know. That's Uve Boll playing Hitler, of course. He's a troll. He loves to push people's buttons. The more offended you are, the funnier it is to him. All right, we can cut it, Mitch. So you guys get it. Let me tell you about some of the things that I admire about him. So first of all, didn't mention he has a doctorate in German literature and a master's in economics. And he really does seem to be a real deal cinephile and critic. He's just more of a producer than a director. The thing about making movies is that in order to make a great one, everything has to be perfect. The set, the acting, the music, the sound effects, all these things have to work perfectly in concert. And if one breaks, the movie just falls apart. And in the documentary, it almost seems like he knows this, and he knows that he can't pull off all of it. So he basically just doesn't care and lets all the elements break and shamelessly optimizes the movies for sex and violence. Now, what I like about him is that he does his own thing. He's not playing, in Hollywood, there's a lot of talk of you got to pay your dues, you got to play the game, you got to play the politics. He didn't do any of that. Not only did he raise his own money and do whatever he wanted, he got jokes in there that certainly were not funny, but he wanted them in there and they got in there. But he also was able to reveal some pretty funny things about Hollywood. So, for example, he's famously said actors are just whores who you pay. So he didn't give a shit who was in his movies. He would go up to a talent studio and ask agents, who's free in 3 weeks? And the agents would just give them a list of like A-list actors, or not A-list, but popular actors. Actors that have been in classics like Ray Liotta, Jason Statham, Ben Kingsley, Michael Madsen. All these people have been in Uwe Boll movies. So he just makes them an offer for 3 weeks from now. And then the actor, knowing that, first of all, nobody's crazy enough to just have a script and shoot it in 3 weeks. These actors know they're not going to get a better offer, and so they just do it. And he ends up being the worst filmmaker of all time who's still able to attract talent because he just knows the business and he knows the real cynicism underlying Hollywood and uses it to his advantage.
So, wait, sorry, just to clarify, they're like, well, I'm not going to get another role in 3 weeks and a paycheck in 3 weeks. So it's almost,
so I'll do it.
It's like the like, oh God, not Instacart. What's that service where you order groceries in like 60 minutes? It's like that for actors, but of getting a paycheck.
I don't know what app you're talking about, but yeah, I would imagine so.
Yeah,
but
Google, never mind. I can't remember it.
Yeah, the thing that really hit me, I mean, first of all, and also one other element. So he obviously got a lot of hate, and for people that are aware of him, it's because from like 2006 to 2012, he was the internet's favorite person to shit on because his movies are bad. But at one point, he challenged all of his critics to boxing matches. So why don't you go ahead and play that, Mitch? And this actually happened. So this is a clip of him fighting Lotax, who is so Uwe is the guy not in the red, white, and blue, or Uwe, excuse me.
Who's Lotax?
Lotax is the founder of the Something Awful forums.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, and Uwe is a real boxer. But he stopped making movies, and this is actually something that resonated with me a lot because maybe some of you know, maybe some of you don't know, but my original plan moving to Hollywood was to make independent films. But once Jacob and I realized that there's just no industry here, that's when we kind of decided to start trying to make digital content. And he says that he stopped making movies because the market for independent film is totally different than it is. He says he used 10 years ago, distribution in Japan, like if you had a movie and you wanted to sell it and get a licensing fee for the whole of Japan, it used to be $1 million. Today, it's only $10,000. So it's a huge drop off. And so now he's a restaurateur. He has a restaurant in, I believe it's Toronto, and actually the restaurant gets great reviews. Apparently it's one of the top restaurants, and it's weird how a guy who is so bad at making movies is so good at opening a restaurant. And I think that he's going to age as an interesting cult figure, and people are going to eventually forgive him for ruining the video game IP.
So are his restaurants better than Guy Fieri's restaurants?
It's actually upscale. I think Guy Fieri's restaurants are more kind of like middlebrow stuff, right?
Right.
Yeah, his are actually upscale, fancy places.
I'm very intrigued. What do you think, Serby?
I'm really happy for this guy. It sounds like he had a dream and he did everything possible to do it. And how often can people say that they want to make a film and he just doesn't care what other people think? He just wants to do it because it makes him happy. I think
totally.
It's great.
Jared,
he did it.
Jared,
no one can take that away from him. He did it. I'm sorry?
What do you have to do to, just make whatever crappy movie you want, and we'll shoot 3 movies at the same time. Serby will be the star of all.
I guess you have to make money for investors who want to invest in you again, and that's what a lot of his movies did. House of the Dead and Alone in the Dark are horrible movies, but both of them overperformed. And so he just doesn't give a fuck. It's honestly, I found it quite inspiring. And another thing,
Jared's going to make movies now.
Another thing is that he is that everyone loves working with him. Like they interviewed all the actors and all the producers, and they're like, he's a really decent guy. He's just bad at directing, but he likes being the director. And there is like a little bit of a tragedy there, in that they put it really funny in the documentary. They say, like, every film has a conversation that always goes between the producer and the director. The producer will always say, hey, we don't have the time to do this. This is going to make it cost more money. And the director's like, no, we need to push the budget. We need to have more time because we need to find the truth. We need to find the real authentic element in this scene. Now, these conversations happen within Uve Boll's head, but the producer always wins. So he basically just says, all right, well, this movie's going to suck anyway, so should we spend 30 more minutes to make it look realistic? Nah, I'd rather pocket the $1,000. Fuck it, cut, move on.
I think it's great. It's like he loves the process of filmmaking. And that to me feels like the purest thing ever. That you just love the action of like making a movie and everything that goes into that.
Yeah. I really recommend the documentary. It's on Amazon. It's called just search the Uve Boll story. You'll find it. I'm actually probably going to start watching some Uve Boll movies just because he's such a unique figure, and anyone who's able to succeed outside of Hollywood has an element of my respect.
All right.
Yeah. How are we doing on time, Serby?
I can give you 10 more minutes.
All right. We're going to skip the last topic, and we're going to do a little bit of the mailbag. So if you want to send us an email, you can hit us up at info@wisecrack.co, or you can hit us up voicemail 213-534-8807. I don't think we have the voicemails set up right now, so we're going to just do the mailbag. So this one is from Brandon. So Brandon says, in response to that Subway ad you guys looked at the beginning of the latest episode of Culture Binge, he has a perspective on it. As a person who makes ads for a living and simultaneously holds great disdain for capitalism and the acidic nature of advertising on culture, I see that Subway ad as a creative win for whoever made it. They got to make a pretty little short about growing up and then slap a sandwich and a logo on it at the end and be done with it. I prefer these pretty engaging ads that have nothing to do with the products. They are completely unsuccessful in convincing me to buy anything, and they provide a recipe or a reprieve from the usual bombardment. If we have to live in a world where we're being inundated with constant advertising, I'd prefer if it was all like this as opposed to the majority of the ones screaming for our attention. And if we want to get more analytical about it, it does sort of put Subway in a better light in my mind, as I recognize that they were the type of client that allowed some creative people to do what they wanted and weren't concerned with slamming their message in my face. What do you think about that, Alec?
I think it's pretty interesting, and I might have brought this up before, but I discovered this magazine a while ago, or like online website, whatever. They have really good articles, usually very interesting, called Mel Magazine. And then later I discovered it was owned by Dollar Shave Club and is like Dollar Shave Club's magazine. And so like I felt tricked into engaging, but like it has nothing to do with that. And I feel like what this person is saying is kind of similar in that, like, yeah, like if an ad agency or company is going to pay you to do something cool and creative, and like you just have to like make a couple of concessions, that's a lot better than like other people can expect. Now, I do still think it's a little insidious, but I at least like entertain and respect that argument being made.
I think his name is Brandon. I agree with
Correct.
him. I think that I find advertisements very stressful and anxiety inducing, especially when they're like very loud and colorful and it's like, buy that sandwich. But I would rather watch a story like this. I mean, it felt like a story. I didn't see the connection to Subway, but I enjoyed it. From like, I don't think every advertisement can be like this. I guess it sort of depends on like the campaign you're running, but I liked it. I thought it was an enjoyable experience, but I don't think that it is sustainable long term.
Yeah, I don't think that. So the thing I'll say is that I also appreciate that it is artistic. It's well put together. There was an example in like 2006 or 2007 when the PlayStation 3 came out. They had this 17-minute short film that came out that had nothing to do with PlayStation. It was just an artsy short film. And then at the end, it was PlayStation 3. But it was an actual completed short film, and it was really good. I wish I remembered what it was called, but maybe I'll post it in the Discord or something like that. But at least in that situation, it was a short film. It felt like a complete piece of entertainment, a complete experience, whereas this just kind of felt like a montage of kind of vague images. But I do agree with Brandon that it's beautiful, and it's more beautiful than your average Subway ad that tries to be funny and isn't really. So anyway, all right, we got one more from Kenneth, and then Serby's got to go. So Kenneth wants to talk about the Keanu-san. So he says, correct me if I'm wrong, but the connection from consumer to celebrity tends to deal in projection and emotional connection for the actor-actress, right? So in this way, Keanu has almost everything going for him and may explain the way things have headed. With The Matrix, Bill and Ted, Cyberpunk, John Wick, and so many other roles With The Matrix, Bill and Ted, Cyberpunk, John Wick, it's so many roles to be played by one man, and particularly in the hugely popular John Wick, the fact that it showed his connection with his dog would make a huge impact on the emotional aspect of the consumer. He fills a role no matter what it may be, becoming a savior character that people see as a true hero. So he then breaks down, so essentially he has familiarity because he's been around since the 90s, emotional connection because people love dogs and showing that in a movie connects with people. He's a badass. In most movies, he becomes an action hero, but retains that connection. And lastly, humble. In this culture of negative views and rumors, Keanu seems unstained. And then he ends by saying the frightening question here is if there's any sense of reality in the personalities or what's portrayed, or if it's all marketing and the like. I think he broke it down pretty well. What do you guys think?
I agree. I think he did a great job assessing all the different aspects. What struck me as the most interesting he said was that Keanu's humble, and I think that's true. Like now, like with Instagram and all these sorts of things where people can say like, look at me, you have somebody who's just doing their work and lives their life, and I like that. I like somebody who just, it's sort of like that guy we were just talking about, who just enjoys the experience of doing whatever they like without doing it for the purpose of getting attention or I'm trying to think of like some like a Kim Kardashian or somebody who like just poses for the selfie and poses for things, and you have somebody like Keanu Reeves who's just like, I did my job and I'm happy with it and here I am.
So you're saying he's the Uve Boll of acting.
But he's more talented.
Yeah. There's a time in his career where I think you could have made that comparison pretty accurately. As I said before, in Bram Stoker's Dracula, he's bad.
Before we wrap up, if it's okay, Jared, I have some shout outs to give.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, so sorry I couldn't bring this up earlier, but for everyone who donated on the stream, thank you. NZ, he said, let's make a clone army as we're talking about gene editing. There is Ryan Richards and Michael Smith. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. All right, we're going to be podcasting again next week. The RSS is coming out. Basically, we submitted it. It should be confirmed in the next couple of days, hopefully by Saturday. So the RSS is coming. We're going to be doing this 3:30 Eastern time on Wednesdays, 12:30 Pacific. That's the schedule we're going to try to keep. Serby is on the clock right now, actually working, so we have to kind of work around that. But we'll let you guys know. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll see you next week. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.